History, controversy. Culture and politics.
What shall we do with an oily sponsor clause in global war?
After years of protests at London's British Museum for taking sponsorship from big oil, the heat's on again. The museum website states, "We're committed to ensuring the museum is run in an open and honest way." But the British Museum wants to keep something under wraps. It is the Chairman's Advisory Group, the CAG, around 30 top business execs, including the oil giant BP, with direct and largely unaccountable access to the museum director and chairman, the former Chancellor George Osborne. All of it behind closed doors, affecting key policy issues like relations with government. The group's meetings are not minuted, its existence does not appear on the website, and they refuse to give the names of all bar 2 members.
It's just a group of influential, well-placed people in business bringing their expertise to run a museum. There's nothing wrong with that.
Then why are they keeping it so secret? It's not common practice, and I think there's a reason why they don't want us to know that these conversations are going on behind closed doors. It's really, really important for a publicly funded national institution like the British Museum, it's also a charity, to be open and transparent about who it's being influenced by, who it's talking to, who is getting a say in the decisions that it makes.
The British Museum said,
"Like all organisations, we engage with a wide range of people, from community groups to sponsors to school children. All decisions are made by the trustees and staff through our governance structure and in the best interests of the museum as a charity. The museum regards these assertions on how we manage, curate and care for the collection as inaccurate."
So how do we know all this? Well, in fact, the information has come from the museum itself. Campaigners put in a Freedom of Information request, and the museum came back eventually after more than 6 months. And the information that you're learning tonight shows that on the one hand, the museum wants to suggest this is just an informal grouping, nothing to see here. But on the other, evidence that it is much more than that.
A museum document states, "CAG is run very informally. The members attend meetings at their own discretion and in their personal capacity, not as representatives of their organisations. It is our view that it would not be within their reasonable expectation that their attendance at these meetings would be publicised." The Museums Association Code of Ethics states museums should build transparent relationships with partner organisations. Moreover, the British Museum documents prove this covert group is consulted on key policy areas. CAG members were sent a confidential briefing document in 2020 to brainstorm new ideas on how the British Museum should engage with the new government. It has only released a heavily censored version of this briefing in response to Freedom of Information requests.
It appears that the remit is much wider than just giving advice about funding. They have these organised meetings, and one has been about how should the British Museum be engaging with the new Conservative government, and so drawing on all of these contacts and business expertise to essentially try and influence the government on the British Museum's behalf.
There's more. The museum remains dogged by controversy about whether artefacts acquired from foreign lands should be returned. From the Elgin marbles, via the Benin bronzes, to the Rosetta Stone. Here too the CAG comes into play, discussing policy and strategy on what the museum coyly calls the repatriation debate. This very morning, a major new exhibition on Stonehenge opened at the British Museum, supported, say the posters, by BP.
Leave the oil in the ground, in the ground, in the ground.
The museum's been occupied in recent years by protesters who say our cultural institutions should refuse fossil fuel sponsorship in a climate crisis, which oil, gas and coal companies have done so much to cause. The museum, remember, pledges to be open and honest. A few months ago, they had a regular meeting with their BP sponsors. This is what the museum released about that meeting under the Freedom of Information Act. A few words, a lot of censoring. Some academics have run out of patience. This week, more than signed a letter to the trustees and directors stating, refusing further sponsorship from BP would send a strong signal that fossil fuel corporations like tobacco and arms companies are no longer welcome in cultural life. Professor Rodney Harrison lectures in heritage studies.
I've never really seen anything like it. I think that academics in many ways like to stay out of politics. They like to remain distant from it. But what we're seeing is a real kind of mobilisation in the sector against these sorts of sponsorship arrangements.
The National Theatre, Scottish National Portrait Gallery, the Tate, the South Bank Centre, the Royal Shakespeare Company, they've all dropped fossil fuel sponsorship, leaving London's science and British museums increasingly isolated in taking the money from oil and gas. Right now, it's understood the museum is trying to strike another sponsorship deal with BP. The British Museum said,
"We follow best practice and fully comply with charitable law. In considering any sponsorship, the museum thinks carefully about the nature and quality of any offer before accepting. Claims that the British Museum is inappropriately influenced by any donations or sponsorship are simply incorrect."
Responding to this report, BP told us,
"We're proud of our partnership with the museum. We respect people's views and understand that some do not welcome our involvement. We believe that the rapid solutions needed to the critical climate issues facing the world will be reached most quickly through dialogue and engagement with companies, governments and individuals working together."
Only last autumn, the government itself intervened to stop oil companies from trying to sponsor the Global Climate Summit in Glasgow. This week's events demonstrate that the debate over oil and gas sponsorship is only going more and more mainstream.